Welcome to Challenging Reality. I'm Chris Barnatt, and in this series we're questioning the certainties of the modern world by examining the key challenges and opportunities of the future. In previous programmes we've looked at the changing nature of human achievement and at the evolution of travel and communications. However, it is with the everyday human consequences of such innovations that we should perhaps be most concerned. In this programme, we're therefore going to look at the impact of technological development on individual human beings, past, present and future. A common view is that ancient civilizations had very little technology. However, this is not really true. All ancient empires rose on the back of mighty technological infrastructures. It's just that ancient methods of agriculture, manufacture and communication exploited human muscle power rather than machinery. Or, as the citizens of the Hellenistic city of Pergamon used to say, their slaves were tools that talked. From the ancient Egyptians to the Roman Empire and beyond, until a few hundred years ago, all civilizations were based on systems of human ownership. The majority of people were therefore either slaves or serfs who had to work the land of a monarch or lord. Most individuals therefore had few rights and few freedoms. However, this was not necessarily because their masters were less moral than people today. It was simply that, in ancient and medieval times, the exploitation of one human being by another provided the only possible mechanism for any level of civilization to function. Across much of Europe, serfdom disappeared in the 17th and 18th centuries, although it was not banned in parts of Russia until 1861. However, while serfdom was on the wane, in parallel the African slave trade had been growing substantially, with the US Census of 1860 reporting over 4 million slaves. Indeed, it took until 1865 for Abraham Lincoln to abolish slavery with the 13th Amendment to the US Constitution. More than any other development, it was the Industrial Revolution that saw an end to human ownership. As powered machinery became available, it was simply no longer effective to purchase human beings as a primary technology base. Paying workers as employees also started to prove far cheaper than the outright ownership of labour. Indeed, with the rise of capitalism, it was essential for most people to be paid for their labour so that they would have money to spend on the products of industrialisation. The decline of serfdom and slavery is therefore far more strongly associated with the birth of modern economic systems than any moral or ethical crusade. With the rise of capitalism and industrialisation, millions migrated from fields to factories, and the role of the majority started to change. As the shackles of serfdom and slavery fell away, a common view is that industrialisation turned most people into the cogs of mighty organisational machines. To some extent, this is also true. However, as industrialisation took hold, for some at least, there were also new rights and increasing freedoms.
Where I'd start with industrialisation and the growth of industrial capitalism, those two things arose at the same time, was there was an enormous freeing up of individuals. Prior to that, you'd had monarchies, you'd had the church, all keeping people in their place. What you had in this period with the Enlightenment and Reformation and all that set of changes, individuals were freed to change history more than ever before. What this meant, particularly with the aspiring middle classes who were coming on the scene, inventors, scientists, businessmen, and this was largely a male thing, these people used to meet, got together. They were shut out of the establishment, so they now could find other ways of asserting themselves. They couldn't own land and just sit back and hunt and shoot and fish. So they would write books, invent devices, set up factories. So the individual is especially important in the middle class context of changing the world and taking forward capitalism and industrialization. Well, what about the ordinary people, let's say the worker individuals? The change that occurs there is many of them started to work outside the family. So as an individual, you were located by the family that you were part of. That's where you did your work and your leisure and all the rest, all in the one place. Individuals now went out. So you've got a stronger sense of the individual emerging with people generally. And remember, democracy emerges alongside industrialization, the growth of capitalism, the bureaucratization of public services. All that is happening at the same time and changing the relationships between individuals, not fundamentally, but quite significantly.
As the 20th century took hold, all manner of technological developments continued to change the lives of millions. In particular, access to travel and communications brought personal freedoms that would have been unthinkable in any previous age. Such freedoms were, however, won at some cost. Most notably, many of the industrial practices of the 20th century were reliant on mass production techniques that enslaved people not to human masters but to the relentless march of machines. The heyday of mass capitalism may certainly have been an age in which standardized consumer goods, from washing machines to televisions to cars, rapidly improved the standard of living. However, just how free individuals became is nevertheless open to debate. By the 1980s, developments in information technology were also starting to trigger a second industrial revolution. Indeed, to this day, the evolution of the Internet continues to enable new patterns of work and new modes of social interaction. Anybody with a computer and a web connection can now go global, and personal freedoms have generally increased as a result. However, the downside of the online revolution is that work can now be moved around the planet as never before. Indeed, with companies now increasingly linking their workers together electronically rather than physically, employment rights hard won across much of the 20th century are therefore reducing substantially. It is also fairly certain that as we slowly emerge from the credit crunch, average job security will reduce further still. Our declining supply of natural resources, coupled with the rising threat of climate change, add yet another level of complexity. Exactly how our lifestyles will and should change over the coming decades is therefore very far from clear.
I think what we're looking for now is solutions that make work more sustainable, not just environmentally, but emotionally and as a reward and as something which people can engage with in a meaningful way. I think we also face challenges around home life. How should we live? Should we live in large cities? Should we live in market town environments? Are we better living in rural communities? And I think there are real challenges about what is the optimum way for people to live in a way that is sustainable, on a scale that works, on a way that people can be self-reliant, or a community can be more resilient.
Yet another set of technological developments that will fundamentally impact the individual are those of genetic engineering and nanotechnology. These will permit at least some individuals to alter the characteristics of themselves and their offspring. In time, they may therefore result in an artificial re-engineering of the human race. The right and freedom of individuals to use genetic and nanotechnologies is therefore something we all need to debate.
Well, again, these modern technologies are just like every other technology we've ever invented. They can be helpful to people, serve welfare, or they can harm people. The most obvious, if we can imagine that moment in history when fire was discovered, Aha, we can heat the food, we can keep warm, we can live longer, we can have nice little parties round the bonfire. Or we can go along to the next cave and burn out the family next door. And we can kill and maim, we can torture people with it. So the possibility was always there with every technology at every point. What would we use it for? So genetic engineering or information technology, whatever you talk about, could lead to the most horrific enslaving and dehumanizing, or the other. And now we come to what I think is such an important point. The issue of human control over these human devices. Now to me, that the best we've got, feeble as it is democracy. This is where we must assert control over all these devices, the drugs and all the rest. But we must, I say we can only have a we, I believe, if we have democracy. If we don't, we will get dictatorship, and just what sort of monstrous systems of control could be devised. They're not too difficult to imagine because we have plenty of dystopian novels, Brave New World and all the rest, that can show us just how horrific a future would be if we let those technologies get into the hands, well, let's put it crudely, of wicked people. Democracy is our best hope.
Across history, and due in no small part to technological development, the rights and freedoms of the majority have significantly increased. Indeed, the 20th century is likely to be remembered as a golden age in which the individual was king. This said, in the face of fundamental global challenges, it's quite likely that in the near future, the rights and power of individuals will have to decrease if human civilization is to survive. The relative power of those in authority is therefore likely to rise. Welcome back to Challenging Reality. In part one, we looked at the impact of technological change on people across history. However, alongside technological development, it's also been particular individuals who've had the greatest impact on the rest of the population. Such a statement may sound extremely obvious. However, given the number of people alive today, yet alone who've ever actually lived, it could also be considered surprising that any of us know of anybody we've never actually met. The fact that most of us do know a great deal about so many famous and infamous people maybe serves as a reminder that even in modern democracies we are less free than we may care to admit. It also perhaps indicates our individual desire to develop a knowledge of distant others as a benchmark against which to lead our own lives. Many of those who have etched their remote existence into our brains are associated with memorable artefacts or events. However, others have won their place in history by challenging realities that have shaped the ways in which we think and live. For example, in proposing that the Earth rotated around the Sun and not the other way around, Nikolai Copernicus challenged the place of human beings at the centre of the universe. A few hundred years later, Charles Darwin's proposition that human beings evolved from animals similarly changed the way we think about ourselves. As just these two examples show, single individuals with a great idea can have a radical impact on the human race. In his groundbreaking book, The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins discusses the transmission of knowledge and ideas by what he calls means rather than genes. Whilst our genes are the carriers of our physical, biological characteristics, means of a unit of cultural transmission that keep our ideas alive.
Examples of everyday memes therefore include fashions, figures of speech, or social practices.
The idea of memes arose following a study of bird songs in the islands off New Zealand. It had long been known that birds on different islands sang different songs. However, until that point in time, it had been assumed that these songs were part of each bird's genetic makeup and hence passed on biologically between the generations of birds living on each island. However, it was discovered that when a bird from one island was taken to another, new hybrid songs emerged that combined tunes from both islands. It was therefore proven that bird songs were learnt rather than genetically programmed, with a single bird able to challenge and change the reality of a population. In other words, bird songs were carried between generations culturally via memes rather than biologically by genes. Today, the memes of humanity are communicated through a very wide variety of media, with the internet the dominant global meme carrier of our age. If, as suggested in the last programme, all human beings are now the cells of a single electronically interconnected planetary life form, memes are quite literally the thoughts that this new creature now thinks. The dominant memes of the early 21st century reflect humanity's collective response to the global challenges that threaten the survival of civilization. The future shapers, the dominant meme setters of tomorrow, will therefore be those great individuals whose ideas will allow us to successfully evolve in the face of global warming, resource depletion, and species-changing technological possibility.
The people who shape the future will in part, I think, be people like the Bill Gateses who develop new technologies that will have major impacts on our lives. From a positive point of view, I guess the people who will really impact the future in a positive way, people who will come up with big technological breakthroughs that hopefully will resolve some of our most intractable, complicated problems, mainly to do with the environment, climate change, water shortages, all those kind of things. Who and how that will happen, it's not clear yet, I think, but one hopes it will happen, or else.
Right, now the people who shape the future, as I'm suggesting all along, could be the monstrous dictators. We have some in the world today. There's always the potential for that. We've seen it throughout history. Dictators, monstrous figures can arise. And they generally don't die themselves before they've killed many millions of people. It can get that bad, and we must always watch that. So therefore, we must look to, whether it's the entrepreneurs, the creative artists, or the politicians, we've got to look to those to operate, talk, and create things in the spirit of human responsibilities to each other.
Future shapers who champion the meme of collective responsibility are also likely to be those individuals who can see the wood for the trees, and who therefore understand how the key challenges of the future interrelate. For example, we need leaders capable of integrating both politics and science, as well as scientists far more attuned to the ethical implications of their latest technological developments.
I think one of the key things is we're going to need people with joined-up thinking, people who can think holistically about issues and who can also think systemically about how impacts in some areas, be it environment, be it town planning, how these issues interrelate and how changes in one area are likely to have effects in other areas. I think we also need people who perhaps are driven by longer term issues, who have a longer time frame in thinking about things. In recent years, we've had a lot of management around short-term goals, short-term performance issues, And I think we really need to move in a situation where people are managing short term, yes, but for the long term simultaneously, and people who have a custodian view of the world going forward.
The idea for this series goes back to 1996, when I was writing the book on which these programmes are based. At that time, I sent scripts to various TV companies in the hope that they would make the series. Unfortunately, nothing then happened. However, only 10 years later, computer technology has advanced to such a level that I've been able to make the entire series by myself. Using fairly standard software and a personal computer, it is now possible for one person to edit audio and video for broadcast. Stock materials can also be obtained from the internet, whilst 3D models can be built and rendered to produce images of anything from a pharaoh's golden death mask to a nanobot or the vastness of space. The production of this series by one person hopefully serves as a powerful example of how technological development has already greatly empowered single individuals. With future developments in genetic engineering, in just a few decades it may also be possible for individuals to program not just TV shows, but life itself. A related possibility is that our desktop technology could evolve into artificial intelligences. This means that some future individuals may actually be machines. Some of these future sentient computers may even be biological if developments in nano and genetic engineering mean that some future technology looks a lot less like this and a lot more like this. If thinking biocomputers are ever invented and grown, the human race will have to learn to share both the Earth and the Internet with a totally new species. Already, South Korea is drafting laws to protect the rights of future robots and artificial intelligences. Some of tomorrow's most powerful future shapers may therefore not be human at all. Throughout history, human beings have rarely been content to accept the constraints of their current situation. As a species, we have therefore become pretty expert at challenging reality. And there is also no reason to believe that our collective desire and capability to change the world will diminish anytime soon. By inventing all manner of technologies, the human race has created the potential, at least at present, for many individuals to make all kinds of choices and to live their lives in a manner that was not possible in the past. Unfortunately, such levels of individual choice and freedom are not remotely sustainable. In the short term, we can all become members of a global community in which we may do as we please with little regard for the consequences. However, in the long term, if we continue to live like this, our civilization will crumble and decay. Collective responsibility is the greatest challenge for the 21st century. By definition, it is also a challenge for us all. Like it or not, we need to accept that many of the certainties of the modern world are no more than an illusion that needs to be exposed as a hoax. The future, more than at any other time in our history, is therefore in all of our hands.